everyone, and welcome to the School Garden Support Organization Network virtual gathering on garden care and management during COVID-19. My name is Tristana Perkle, and I am the Edible Education Leader for Whole Kids Foundation and a member of the SGSO Advisory Committee. I'm really excited to bring to you a number of resources today regarding garden care and management. Just a little bit of housekeeping items. If we could go to the next slide, please. There might be a little bit of delay. There is a copy of this presentation in the handout section in your control panel, so you can download a copy of the presentation. What might be really helpful if you do is that all of the links are hyperlinked, so you can click on any of the links that we share today. There will be a recording of this webinar. So you'll have access to listen to this afterwards, and you can share it with anybody. So you'll get an automatic email after the webinar with a copy of the recording. We are also going to invite folks to join us to share at a certain point. So there is a raise your hand function in your control panel. If you want to play around with that and kind of raise your hand and try that, we will be allowing folks to share at a certain point if you'd like to share. And then finally, we will also leave time for questions at the end. So if you want to enter in questions kind of during the webinar as folks are talking, we will collect those and share this at the end. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to John.
Hello, thank you, Tristana. Welcome, folks. Happy 50th Earth Day. This is one of my favorite photos from programs that I help manage in Santa Cruz, California. I work with Life Lab, and we do teacher trainings and school garden programs. These are some kids in Watsonville that are enjoying a spring harvest a couple years back. So just remember, the earth laughs and flowers. You can join virtual Earth Day events going on across the country today. So with that, we're going to jump into what our SGSO network is and get the show on the road with content today. So we are a peer-to-peer learning organization of school garden support orgs, and we share among one another. We encourage dialogue among school garden support organizations to better our practices in our own spaces where we're supporting school gardens. We do that through webinars, in-person gatherings, and we have digital resources. We've been focusing a lot on our digital resources lately. We've organized our forum, which you can find on the website linked there below. And we have some COVID tags. So if you did want to go in and join our discussion or see what other folks are sharing, you can join our forum. And we've been trying to give some organization to our forum by having topic areas. Today, we're going to be talking about garden care and management, and we have a whole forum thread on that as well. If you're new to an online forum, I highly suggest you read how to use our school garden forum or a Google group. It gives some really basic etiquette about how to use an online forum. I know they're intimidating because you just don't know when you're replying to one person or replying to 600 people. So take a look at that page to learn a little bit more. We have been sharing on topics related to COVID. We had one last week on distance teaching and learning resources, and you can find that archived on our website. Today, we're talking about garden care and management, and we got 3 more scheduled. So we are going to be having a social gathering this Friday, SGSO Unite. We're going to talk about fiscal stability next week, and then the following week, ideas about supporting your staff and just running your organization during these crazy times. I do want to invite, if any of these upcoming topics on fiscal stability or managing your SGSO organization, these are areas that you have expertise in. We would love for you to be a presenter and share. So you can email us there at network@sgsonetwork.org. We are truly a peer-to-peer organization, and we need folks from other organizations to share their best practices and how they're getting along during these times right now. So we have been putting a lot of great resources on one page, sgsonetwork.org/COVID. Everything that I've been mentioning, distance teaching resources, we have a whole list going there. You can submit your own for others. All our virtual gathering registrations are there, links to our forum. And now, just last night, I created a garden care and use document where you can see resources that our presenters are sharing today and others related to garden access care and harvest/distribution. You can also submit your own resources if you have good things there. So feel free to visit our website and see what folks are sharing via our forum or these more consolidated resources that we've been putting together. So today we're going to have very short presentations from some SGSOs across the country. We've got Moses Thompson from the Tucson Unified School District, the University of Arizona Community and School Garden Program. Patrick Littleton manages school gardens through extended learning and food services in the Pajaro Valley Unified School District here in Santa Cruz County, California. And Laura Platt and Margot Heffron from Common Threads in Bellingham, Washington. They've done some great work to support their garden programs. And throughout, we're going to have some polls and some time for our audience to raise their hands and share their perspective as well. So our goal today is share solutions, straight to solutions, share resources that you all can use and hopefully modify for your own purposes. So with that, a little bit of overview. When you all registered for this webinar, you posed some questions and I codified these questions, and the bulk of us are interested in how to do safe harvest and distribution of plant material. A lot of folks were interested in what kind of safety protocols do we need to invite people to work or volunteer in our gardens. Folks had questions about garden care and planning. Where are you moving forward with? And that's a big question mark. We just don't know. Accessing school garden sites. Some of you are getting in your gardens, some of you are not. And so we want to talk about strategies to get into your gardens to care for them. Some other folks were interested in managing volunteers and then ideas for communications. These are the topics that we're going to, at the end of the discussion, when we're inviting folks like yourselves to share out or to pose questions in the question prompt. These are the areas that we're looking to share. So Tristana is going to turn on some polls to get a little understanding of our audience, to understand who we've got in the room. So Tristana, poll. So you should see this poll live on your screen, and you can just answer it and hit submit. And when you do that, you will see a summary when Tristana shares that summary out to us. So, and it looks like, so most of you are not being able to access your garden yet, but very close. So we're a three-way tie here. So we've got a mix of folks that have been able to visit their gardens. Some have just some access to their gardens, but the majority, the slight majority here has no access at all. And so hopefully we're going to share some resources and ideas of how we could get folks into their gardens to take care of them. So we've got another question here, and this one relates to your garden planning. So Tristana is going to open this poll. It's on your screen there. Are you moving on as normal as you've done in the last years for planning and planting? Are you modifying? Are you still in the dark? Or you just decided that you're just not going to plant? You might just cover crop or let your beds go fallow. So submit your polls, and Tristana will give us a summary of what our audience is doing related to gardens here. So most of you don't know. The small majority do not know. Have a modified plan. That's great to know that we're able to get out into our gardens. And some are just moving on as forward. So, as normal. Great. And a small section of you are not planning at all, which is a noble thing to do. Don't think if you're choosing to just cover crop your gardens or heavily mulch them, you don't want any bare soil over the summer, heavily mulch them, and letting your veg rest for a season. That's not a bad thing to do considering what's going on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Moses, and he's going to share a little bit about the work they've done in Tucson.
Hi, everybody. I work to support collaboration between the University of Arizona and the Tucson Unified School District. On the university side, we teach a class, a school garden class for university students, and then those students serve as a workforce for the network of school gardens that we have in Tucson Unified. Tucson Unified's has about 91 school sites, and we have about 60 gardens in those school sites. For us in Tucson, March is probably the most productive month. It's kind of when our production peaks in school gardens in Tucson. So when COVID-19 hit and the schools were closed, our big challenge was harvesting and distribution. And so looking to the CDC, looking to the Arizona Department of Health Services, we start to, and also in consultation with the University of Arizona, we started to assemble our own protocol. Next. Next slide. And so once we'd done our initial homework, we reached out to site principals and the director of TUSD Food Services to run by our protocol, but also to get their feedback. Our district had assembled a COVID-19 response team. And so it was really important for us to know that our protocol was addressing what their worries were. And so some things that were interesting that came to light with site principals, a lot of their main concerns had to do with touch points in the building. And so after talking to the principals, we realized it was really important for us to make it very clear that we were just operating in the school in the school gardens and not accessing classrooms and bathrooms, and we weren't going to cross-contaminate touch points that the custodians were sanitizing. So then another thing that's important once we realized that is to reach out to folks that were working in the gardens and make sure that they're using bathrooms before they come to work in the gardens, that it was clear that the bathrooms were not accessible. With food services, they also were very supportive but had input. And also by consulting with food services, it also opened up access to some of their supplies. And so they have been providing us with gloves and bags, which is nice because then that's something else that we can add into those protocols. One thing that we've noticed at Tucson Unified is that access and operation differs significantly from site to site, that some schools are locked down hard with one entry, one exit point with a security guard that kind of signs people in and out. Other schools seem to be a lot more loose, and so that's kind of been a challenge. And then with the distributions that we've been doing, we found that instead of centrally organizing distributions, that really what's kind of evolved is that sites are doing grassroots efforts to do distributions in their own ways, and we give them access to the protocol and materials that they need to do that. The other thing that I would say is that by going to TUSD leadership with our protocols to get their input and to get things okayed by them, was it really bolstered their support and the visibility of what we're doing. And on a couple of occasions, Tucson Unified have sent out photographers and videographers to kind of document what we're doing. So not only did they give us the green light, but they're kind of valuing and supporting the work that we did. Next. I wanted to just kind of dump in a sample protocol, and I'm not going to read through this for you. It's more of just something for you to have in a resource that you can look at. The last thing that I'll share with you is kind of, as we've done a number of these harvests and distributions, they've evolved, and some new things that have kind of taken shape that are nice. One is inviting families to come in to do you pick harvests. In that way, a single family comes in. I feel like it's really safe and controlled. We can maintain our own social distancing, and then families are doing all of the own harvesting and produce handling for the produce that they take home. The last kind of evolution is we've gone from doing kind of drive-through distributions to setting out tables with prepackaged grab bags, where folks come and kind of take what they need. And again, it just eliminates more potential cross-contamination. And that's it.
Thank you, Moses. That is so great to hear that your district is highlighting what the school district is doing in response to COVID and food access. It's real exciting to hear. So we're gonna jump on to another poll, and so Tristana will launch that poll. So just curious if your site follows any protocol related to safe produce or seedling distribution. It seems like folks are distributing produce and baby plants and or seeds. So let us hear what you're doing, and we'll see what we got for our community here. We have about 220 people on our talk right now. And the survey says, wonderful, that's great to hear that the high majority of you are in communication with your decision makers to continuing having your garden serve produce and or plant material to your communities. So that's really great to hear. And as you continue to do that work, I would highly encourage you to share any protocols. If you do create some, like Moses has done, Moses's protocols are highlighted. The considerations that they were using are highlighted on our forum, as well as on the generated kind of summary resource that's on our SGSO-Network /COVID page. So please share those out, because folks are going to be looking for common language to copy and share with their administrators. So with that, we're going to transition to Patrick Littleton, who works in Watsonville in Central California. He's going to share a bit about his programs and the work they're doing to support their gardens.
Hi, thanks, John. I'm a garden nutrition educator through Fitness for Life that teaches through the after-school-based programs within the Pajaro Valley Unified School District in Watsonville, California. Our program teaches garden-based learning at 8 school sites, along with physical fitness, swimming, biking, dance classes, etc. Today, I really like to focus on how we're kind of changing our overall planting strategy to accommodate from a summer school type of garden that we otherwise were planning to now really try and focus on a garden that students can hopefully return to in August that's lush and full. So here are some of our maintenance strategies that we're currently focused on. And at the moment, district staff are allowed to be present on campus at specific times. And mostly that's when those school sites are giving out homework packets and that weekly distribution of resources where families are driving by and picking up that material. So we'll utilize that as a window to be able to get in to the school gardens as the school is unlocked and be able to maintain. A lot of our produce was distributed right before school got out, and kind of going off of what Moses mentioned on how March is a really productive time. A lot of lettuce and quick growing vegetables are ready in our school gardens around that time. So anticipating that schools were being closed, we tried to get out a lot of that produce before this happened. We are now in the process of planting our summer crop. That involves single harvest crops that have a flexible harvest window. So some of the examples would be like flower and popping corn, winter squash, dried beans, potatoes, melons, and gourds. Those things that ideally could be cooked, but also don't have a finite usage of when it needs to be utilized. So as opposed to tomatoes and lettuce and things like that that really don't fit the context of where our school gardens are at the moment. One of the most important things, if you are planning on putting in a summer crop, is drip irrigation with a timer. Without that, things are very difficult, especially if access to the garden is inconsistent. And of course, all of our school gardens are different. We have some bigger school gardens that are more like school-based farms, and we also have really tiny, unique kitchen-style gardens that are very specific. So we try and tailor our strategies to best fit the context of each of those gardens. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, our staff are able to get into the gardens, and when we do that, we are following a protocol that best fits in with what our local health department is recommending. So we are all wearing a face mask or a face covering and gloves. We try and limit the number of people that are in the garden to either 1 or 2 people. And if there's 2 of us, we are keeping our distance. We are also creating online content for our students and staff to be able to share and link into their weekly lessons to still be able to deliver some of our programming distantly. We're also planning our summer distance learning component, and part of that would be seed and plant observations that students can do at home, and we are working to be able to provide all those resources for families to pick up at those school sites as they pick up their weekly materials. Another awesome resource that I would share with you that is just about to expire. You can get your SafeServe certification up until April 30th. So I definitely recommend that, to share that link with your staff. It really covers great resources for being able to safely handle food and distribute it. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Great stuff to share. And it's also great to hear that your gardens are still operating and you're able to find ways to connect to your community. I also like the tip about crop planning, to be choosing crops that you don't have to be tending and harvesting constantly. Things that can sit in the field like a popcorn or a dry bean is a really great strategy to do, considering we don't really know when we're going to be back in our gardens right yet. So we're going to invite some other folks. Queena and Rebecca have mentioned that they're going to share briefly, so we're going to unmute them. Also, if you would like to share something related to harvest, handling, or distribution, some success stories of how your programs have been doing it, raise your hand and Tristana will look down the list if there are folks that are willing to share out briefly. And we'll unmute you to hear a little bit about how folks are dealing with harvesting, handling, and distribution plant materials. So with that, we're going to unmute Queena from North Carolina Cooperative Extension, and she's going to share a little bit about how she and their program has been sharing seeds and starts.
Thanks so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Queena Weber-Shirk. And I work with North Carolina Cooperative Extension in Guilford County as an extension agent, specifically supporting community gardens and school gardens. There's a really rich history here. So there are about 150 active community and school gardens that I support, and about 70 of those are school gardens. So what I really wanted to share with you today are 2 ways that we're continuing to support school gardens by sharing out seeds and seedlings. Sharing seeds is something that we do annually, and in the past that's been through an event in February that everybody comes to and gets seeds. That was able to happen this February, and part of what that meant is that we did have extra bulk quantities of seeds available. And so what we've been able to do is create kits for volunteers that include gloves, bulk seeds, labels, and then either coin envelopes or small like plastic jewelry bags or snack bags, and spoons and paper to be able to tally how much they're coordinating, and then drop in a contactless way those kits off with volunteers, so that they can repackage our bulk quantity of seeds down to smaller quantities that are either being shared directly with school gardens, or we're working with some community partners to be able to share seeds, specifically vegetable seeds, out with families that might be interested in growing in a container or in a spot in their backyard. And for us, the really key part has been through collaboration. So we've been partnering with, we have 2 Food Corps AmeriCorps service members in our community. We've also been partnering with Guilford Partnership for Children, supports early childcare and education, and there are still a number of open centers and homes in our county. And so they're coordinating to distribute seeds out to both those open centers and the families that are associated with those centers. And as well as working directly with the parents and teachers and community members that are supporting school gardens in our community. And we also, about a month ago, right when everything was shut down, were able to do some distributions of plants that were donated to us from a local university and a local FFA at a high school that had to cancel their spring plant sales. And the way we handled that distribution is that we had a location where the plants were set out, and gardeners signed up for a 10-minute slot on SignUpGenius to be able to pick up the plants so that they weren't coming in contact with us and they weren't coming in contact with each other. I think that's all I have to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are some great strategies. I like the 10-minute plant pickup. Rebecca, are you on the line?
I am, thank you.
And just to share, sorry, Rebecca, before you get started, Erin Mahan, you raised your hand, you'll be going next. So I will unmute you next just so that you're ready. Okay, great. Thank you, Rebecca.
Sure. I run a couple of school gardens in Schenectady, New York. We're a district of about 10,000 students, majority low income and food insecure. So right now I have an army of volunteers along with myself starting seeds that we would normally be starting in our high school greenhouse for distribution to our gardens and planting with students. We are attempting right now to get at least a couple of thousand seedlings, mostly of vegetables, but also of flowers and herbs, into the hands of students and their families. I am attempting to still get into the greenhouse, but there's a lot of negotiation going around with that because right now that building is completely shut down. Volunteers and myself have been working on this. We've been gloved, masked, we've been disinfecting materials, working in teams of 2 while socially distancing, and we are arranging, once these have germinated and are hardy seedlings, we're going to be coordinating with our food services to deliver these seedlings into the hands of our students at food distribution points at the schools with the gardens, and then hopefully we will have enough for our summer enrichment program, which we usually have about 1,500 students enrolled in. So that we're working with also some community partners, some of our local urban farms, to see if they can also help us with the seedlings, while looking for donations as well from horticultural programs and our local cooperative extension for plants that they couldn't sell in their annual plant sales, etc.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rebecca. And Tristana, you said Erin was next?
Hi there. I actually did not mean to raise my hand, but I will speak because we are working in our school garden. It's all good. I am in a small rural community in Southern Oregon in Brookings, and we have 2 school gardens as well as a greenhouse that we've been able to work in, mostly because we don't have to access the school buildings to get into our gardens. It's just a matter of getting through a gate. So we do have access to our gardens. We had planted a bunch of seedlings with the kids, lettuce and tomatoes, which we're trying to distribute tomato plants to our kids now that they're about ready to go, and to plan an activity for them with that, where they plant them in hanging upside down water jugs, so something that everybody can do at home and then have that food available. We are working with our food service to get the lettuce into the hands and into these bulk food bags that they're handing out regularly on a bi-weekly basis. So we will be distributing our lettuce that way, and then just kind of modifying our garden plan, so when kids come back in the fall, there'll be a lush garden that has more of those like fall squash, and we want to do some carrots and just food that will be ready for the kids when they come back in the fall, instead of focusing more on the fresh foods that we were growing for the salad bar at the school. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Erin. Wow, I'm hearing a common thread. It takes a community, and a lot of you are relying on partners, and also having protocol is a real important thing, setting up your systems so that they're safe, and keeping those things in mind. So I know others of you had your hands raised. We're going to save your hand raised moment for the end, where we're planning to have a lot of time to share out and continue with questions. But what we're going to move forward now with folks from Common Vision or Common Threads in Bellingham, Washington. Laura, Platt, and Margot are going to share a bit of how they've been managing their gardens.
Thank you, John. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide if you'd like. So just a couple of things that might give you a little bit of context for what we're up to here at Common Threads is that we're coordinating with 24 gardens across 5 districts, and certainly the process for school garden access has been very different district to district. And we've gotten some guidance both at a state and county level, and certainly the that guidance has sometimes helped to persuade our district partners, but the process has moved faster or slower from one place to the next. The other thing I just wanted to call out is that we host a team here in Bellingham of 13 AmeriCorps members currently. So, and typically what those folks are busy doing is gardening with kids in the spring. So it was a pretty obvious pivot for us to, for the gardens that we have had access to, just to move to more of a production model rather than a planting seeds with kindergartners model. And so I anticipate we're going to be generating quite a lot of food this year. The other thing I should mention is that Common Threads is one of the co-leads of our statewide farm to school school garden community of practice, so that some of the slides that you'll see coming up are part of the state conversations going on around school garden access. So you can go ahead to the next slide. We have been distributing our food. Tristana at Whole Kids, you'll be especially glad to hear that when we reached out to our health department to make sure that they were okay with us harvesting for distribution, their response was, you guys wrote the book on that. And what they were referring to was the Garden to Cafeteria Toolkit that Common Threads and Bellingham Public Schools was able to develop a couple years ago with tremendous support from Tristana at Whole Kids Foundation and also from Andrew Novak at Slow Food USA. So we just, what we've done so far is distributed directly to our central kitchen. We have a scratch cooking kitchen, and then from there, they've been adding it on to the emergency food distribution boxes that they've got. And I imagine we'll continue to play with other models of as efficiently as possible getting some of this produce into the hands of hungry people. I should note that we're also, in contrast with Patrick and Moses, our season was just beginning when this started. So we're a little bit behind on figuring out some of the distribution stuff. This was our first harvest last week from our greenhouse. Go ahead, John. So as I mentioned, we've worked at a state level with the Washington State Department of Agriculture Farm to School, and I won't read through this, but just so you know it's there, they did a really nice job of curating everything from OSPI guidance to the governor's proclamation. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see they drew on a couple other resources, and I think that these should all be live links for you to check out. But it's just been really great to get state level support in saying, you know, of course, being outside is an essential activity, and of course, growing food is an essential duty. So let's find good ways to make that happen. Go ahead, John. We found that from the State Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, the guidance was a little bit more of a, here's what we know, but honestly, it's just up to the local districts. And so that's the reality that we've found here, is that district by district, the conversations have been different. You can go to the next slide. Here again, we reached out to our local health department, and this is a text conversation, so not an official missive from the health department, but we've been fortunate to be in a county where the health department's stance is very much that growing food is what we all should be doing right now, and anything that they can do to support that happening in an appropriate, socially distanced, sanitary way would be great. And the final thing that I'll note down here is that I think our longstanding reputation in the community has sometimes been to our benefit. This was one of our school district's directives to their principals, and they basically said, well, let Common Threads figure it out. So that's been I think mostly a blessing, just to be given that grace to establish protocol that we feel comfortable with. And Margot is going to speak more to that in a minute. I think this might be where we transition there. Will you go to the next slide, John? Yeah, so I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Margot, because she's been the one actually working on the protocol.
Great, thanks, Laura. So Common Threads started to, once school shut down, we wanted to make sure that our staff and AmeriCorps members who are managing those gardens can get out and work in our office and use our vehicles and equipment safely. So the first kind of protocol we put together was a workplace protocol, and that was more for our, again, personnel that needed to access our shared vehicles to get to their gardens, or our office and hoop house where we are growing our starts. But then we wanted to make sure to, our goal is to try and get more volunteers and community families out to those gardens to help and have that place as a sanctuary. So we simplified those protocols to create a simple best practices sheet geared towards more of our volunteers, and those have links to our garden signage, which is hanging up in all the school gardens, outlining all of our safety protocols. I want to credit Lower Columbia School Gardens in Washington State. They gave us their example, and we kind of riffed off that. And then all of our best practices, I also want to give credit to Cultivating Success, the program put on by University of Idaho and Washington State University's Extension. They did a webinar a couple weeks ago, and they have a recording on their website that really outlined best practices for accessing and using school gardens. So we kind of boiled their stuff down that was relevant to us, and we're putting it in place. So some things we provided are hand washing stations at each garden. All gardens have different access to water, and all buildings have closed off for bathroom access. So we wanted to create a simple hand washing station that volunteers and our AmeriCorps members can use. All of our personnel have to wear masks while working in the gardens. And then we recently, it was brought to our attention that our bleach solutions that we were using don't last. Their effectiveness doesn't last in the sun or when it gets hot. So we are currently transitioning to an alcohol solution. Next slide, please. And so we also wanted to set up some volunteer management. So we use SignUpGenius to help facilitate social distancing. And our goal is to not only get our current volunteers out, but hopefully have more community families able to go and visit and enjoy the space of the garden once some stay-at-home proclamations have been lifted. So the SignUpGenius, we have one for each school that we manage, and each day from now until August, we're going to have 5 2-hour time slots that one volunteer or family can sign up for. So this facilitates the distancing and not having too many people congregate at the gardens. And we share these links out to our current volunteers, and then food educators who are managing each garden would reach out with a garden care guide, which is a general guide to growing things here in Whatcom County and the Pacific Northwest. And then each garden had its own care details for outlining how to access the water, the gate key codes, and what is growing and ready to harvest in each garden. So that is what we have so far going on. And again, our goal is to try and once some restrictions are lifted, to try and get families more access to these gardens.
Wonderful. Thank you, Common Threads, Margot and Laura. Some great stuff. And they did create some incredible signage and sign-up sheets and protocol. And all of those we've been sharing through our list of resources on our SGSO-Network.org/COVID page. We'll also be sharing, or in the handouts, you can download a copy of this presentation that has live links. So all the things that have been linked to, you'll be able to access them, whether it's in the handout that you're able to download here, or in the follow-up email, or posted on our forum. So once again, our goal is for our organizations or organizations like ourselves to share peer-to-peer resources so that you can take them, mix them up, and make them work for your community. So with that, we're gonna open this up to folks to share out. So once again, these are the main areas that folks had questions related to school garden care during COVID-19. And some of you have already mentioned you're going to share, so we're going to start out with, I don't exactly know how to pronounce your name, Ibiti. I'll let us know about that. And I know Jazra and then Hope. We're going to have them share in that order. So Tristana will unmute them, and we're going to hear a little bit about how they've been working in their garden programs. And then after that, we'll continue with folks that have their hands raised to share some brief solutions, maybe the things that maybe haven't been discussed yet. It would be great to hear some new solutions related to this work. And or if you have questions, type them in, and Tristana is going to be moderating those. And we hope to get to pose those questions for some of our panelists to share. So with that, Abiti, we'll have you share if you're on the line.
Great. And just before I hand it over to you, EBT, many of you have shared that the handout was not working. I think it's working now, so sorry about that. Some technical difficulties, but you should be able to now download it. Click on that link and download it, and then there are links within the handout. So BT, here you are. I'm unmuting you now.
Great, thank you so much. So yeah, you guys are pretty close. My name is Ibti, and I work with the Fresh Farm Food Prints program here in DC. And I, first of all, this call has been super helpful to hear about all the great work that folks are doing around the country, and especially some of the protocols for working in the garden, because we're in the process of developing our plan to scale up from sort of educational demonstration gardens around the city to production. So I am lucky enough at my garden in Northwest DC to have a cadre of families and community volunteers that have been helping out in the garden on the weekends and over the summer. So when we decided that, when it was decided that the schools were going to close, I had a ready network of folks to help who had some experience already, mainly with watering and weeding and helping to maintain the garden paths. But once we were informed that you know, the new social distancing requirements were in effect, I set up a Google Calendar so that we could make sure that the garden was still watered every day, especially the areas that didn't have drip irrigation, or before the first 3 weeks the drip irrigation hadn't been turned on, because we use the water source from the public pool nearby. So folks were out there each day hand watering, so we wanted to make sure the garden was watered every day, because we just planted a whole bunch of late winter and early spring crops with the kiddos the last few weeks of school. We were in session. But then once we had the social distancing recommendations and then requirements, the calendar has been super helpful, making sure that different people are going there at different times to make sure that we don't have more than even a couple people in the garden at a time. So the way that we set it up was as a Google Calendar, and then as folks contacted me after I reached out to all of our volunteers that had worked with the garden over the summer, I added them and gave them editing permission so they could view the shared Google Garden calendar and then put down when they were going to be there, and also check to see if or when other people were going on that same day to make sure that the garden was getting watered, but not too many of us were there at a time. So I haven't used SignUpGenius, but that seems like a variation on a similar method. I don't know if folks can speak a little bit more later about whether with SignUpGenius people only see that a spot is taken, or if they can see who's going to be there, or if there's sort of flexibility on times from day to day, or if it's just set times the same time every day during the week. But I think that could be a really useful tool. I'm also used to teaching in a classroom. It's a little weird to have like silence on the other end. I don't know if this is helpful to anyone.
This is great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So we are gonna jump on to Jazra, and you mentioned navigating policy. So I know Farm Fresh Food Prints, you guys shared on the last one too. Some great stuff is happening too in terms of sharing curriculum. So thanks for your work. And Jazra, let's hear a little bit about your policy work in Berkeley Unified School District.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's great to hear everyone's ideas around accessing the school gardens and the grounds during this time. We actually don't have anything new to share outside of what has already been shared in terms of policies. So as a district program, we have a school garden in all of our schools. That's a total of 18 school gardens. And we work with the facilities department to allow garden educators onto these grounds. And as employees, we're able to get that permission. So that might be the only new thing that we're able to add here. And the policy is according to CDC guidelines with masks and gloves. And we're working with volunteers that we've worked with in past at these sites that we're familiar with, that are familiar with the garden and what needs to be done. There's a protocol for bringing your own tools or using shared tools for disinfecting pre and post. And that's all communicated to the vetted volunteers prior, because garden educators can't actually be on site in the garden with volunteers, which is all kind of known. The only people that can access are either employees or volunteers separately. And if you are a volunteer, you have to either be a single family or one volunteer at a time. So we haven't progressed into the next level of actually coordinating multiple volunteers at site to help. Garden educators seem to be able to maintain their spaces with this guidance and on their own thus far. We don't have huge gardens. Most of our gardens are instructional spaces. Only one of our large middle schools is a garden for production. And they have about 4 staff, and they follow CDC guidelines of distance for production. And we do harvest our school garden produce using these same guides, and we're all food safe certified. So we harvest them accordingly, and we provide that to the food pantries for donation. One of the unique issues that we are grappling with, though, is that a lot of our school gardens are on school campuses that are also jurisdictioned for parkland with the city. So when our schools are not in session, the public can access these spaces as parks. And the Berkeley Police Department has had trouble policing public spaces as is, and they have not been really helpful in policing our garden spaces in these now jurisdictioned parklands. So sometimes garden educators are out maintaining the gardens, and they are experiencing the public in the space, whether that's adjacent or directly in, and that's a bit cumbersome and uncomfortable and unsafe for our educators. So what we're thinking about doing, since we can't police, we don't have the staff to police, nor is that our job, and the district is also struggling with very little staffing on campuses. Select staffing can actually only access the campuses, so we don't have the human power to be policing. So we are going to be engaging our students in curriculum and lessons, because developed some really great distance learning blogs and YouTubes. Garden educators have all kinds of videos and connections with lessons that they are providing to their classroom teachers and their students. So we're going to try one around public health and safety. And the messaging is going to be, this is a school garden and it's to protect, to be protected for students. And we want to welcome students back into this space when we are able to in the fall, hopefully. And we also want to make this a safe space for our garden educators to be in while they are maintaining them. In addition, this is food that's being donated to our pantries. So it'll be artwork that can be electronically sent to our garden educators and posted around the gardens as a positive reinforcement so that our community feels empowered to help protect these spaces since we're not able to police them. That is a new thing that we are trying to do with that collaboration and connection of public and not necessarily private, but different public entities in our garden spaces.
So Jazra, I'm going to pause you here because we have Hope and then we wanted to get to a couple questions. So I thank you for sharing out, and also want to note that Jazra's, the resources that they've been doing for distance teaching and learning are referenced from our COVID page as well, because they have done a lot of work of having their garden educators sharing distance learning resources. Also great to hear about your positive messaging that you're working on, Jazra, about the purpose and power of school gardens during these crazy times. So with that, I want to turn it over to Hope. And Hope, if you could focus on anything new that hasn't been discussed in our discussion, and if you don't have as much new, we can keep it brief, and then we'll try to get to a couple questions on content that we haven't addressed today. So Hope, are you out there?
All right, I'm here. So yeah, it's amazing how much great content has already been shared. The piece that I will kind of add to is just the strength of our collaborations pre-pandemic are really playing out now. And so kind of going forward, really thinking about creating those systems of structure and support so that, you know, when crisis hits, there's actually already a network in place. So one of the networks that we had created was with a nearby housing authority development, and we are growing in our greenhouse. So I'm in Massachusetts, and unlike a lot of the speakers today, we are still very much in early season, and so only our greenhouses are really active. And we were able in our greenhouse to start seedlings for the housing development, and they were coming, and members of the community were coming to water in the greenhouse. And so those partnerships are still happening now, and we are still growing seedlings for them to now plant into their own community gardens, as well as the school garden. We also use SignUpGenius in order to maintain the social distancing and make sure that only a small number, 1 or 2 people, are in the garden at a time. And so the families who come and take care of the greenhouses are signing up through SignUpGenius, and they're also able to harvest the lettuce and the peas and things like that that we would have been sharing with students right now and bring them home to their communities. And then we are focused on planting for the fall. So I'll echo what Patrick was saying about planting corn and dry beans and some of those crops. And we're really focused on making sure that we have a bountiful fall harvest.
Wonderful. Thank you, Hope. So incredible resources have been shared today, incredible stories. We do want to get to a couple questions, and Tristana is going to close out our webinar by leading us through those questions, and our panelists will chime in to answer their perspective. Tristana?
Awesome. Thank you, John, and thanks to everyone who's shared. This is absolutely incredible. Let's start with, are any of you who are sharing seedlings or produce home to families, are you sharing any information? Do you have a one-pager and links? any tips for how to plant things? Maybe just kind of share with us the content that you're including. Any of our panelists would love to hear. And some of you are muted, so Patrick and Laura, if you're trying to talk, you are muted.
Tristana, I'll say that this is Laura. We've thought about it. We haven't gotten to it yet. So if anyone's doing that really nicely, I'd love to know how it's going.
We did it with fava beans just because we have fava beans coming out the ears right now. The other thing we were asked to do by TUSD Food Services was to include a slip of paper that says that the produce is unwashed, just so folks know to wash it when they take it.
Yeah, and I would just say that we're just focused on delivering those message via social media, like our Instagram stories or other online feeds that can get that message out.
Great, thank you. And when you're providing kind of seeds or seedlings, are you providing pots or planters, kind of like the materials for them to garden with? Any of you?
One idea that I'm experimenting with is having, just like the U-Pick harvest, is having a U-load compost and mulch opportunities for folks, because we have some stockpiled mulch and compost that were going to be used for spring plantings, but with the schools closed, they're going unused right now. So we haven't done it yet, but it's kind of an idea that I'm kicking around.
And I'll chime in here to let you know that on our resource list, which is under the garden care and use section on this COVID page that you see on your screen right here, the National Farm to School Network put together a multi-page document about models and examples of sending students home with seeds. So they link to a couple different programs and how those programs have been doing that. So there is a space to do a little research and find that out.
Great, and we also got one of our attendees, Pamela, just shared that they're emailing families to have them use newspaper pots and other kind of recyclables. You know, toilet paper rolls are great to starting seeds. So that's another option or opportunity to share to use recyclables. Great. Do you have any specific tips for how to sanitize really any equipment you're using, both kind of in harvesting or also in the materials that you're sending out to folks? What are the specifically kind of like how are you doing that?
We spoke with a microbiologist recently that had recommended to us using 70% alcohol as opposed to the 90 or 92% alcohol, that the higher the alcohol, the quicker it evaporates and doesn't have the same penetration power as like a 70% alcohol. So that's been kind of a part of our learning curve. And so we use 70% alcohol in a spray bottle. And the spray bottle uses it really kind of judiciously, so it stretches it far as opposed to like a squeeze bottle.
And I'll say that I reviewed a lot of the resource lists that community gardeners have been sending out around sanitation and safe use in the garden. And they all address the sanitation issue, and just to reiterate, they've been saying 70%. But if you do click onto a list of resources, you can see what some of these universities and community garden programs are suggesting in terms of sanitation.
Great. Let's see, why don't we do one more? When folks are having people kind of do family signups, how are you managing that? Are you instructing them with what needs to be done each day, and how are you doing that?
I'll speak to that. Again, our SignUpGenius is how they sign up, but then the food educators, what's great about SignUpGenius is that you can download the volunteer or sign up contacts, and then you can see, you can contact them directly with the resources. So we use our garden care details documents where we can just keep that as a working document to add in tasks for them to do, things that are available to harvest, things that are growing that they can water, and other details like that for each garden.
Awesome. Thank you, Margot. We really appreciate that. I also wanted to share that Erin just piped in via our chat section that they're distributing seeds by sending them in the mail to students, and then they have YouTube gardening videos that go along with those seeds. And they're also partnering with a local art center who distributes art via no contact pickup. So that's a fun extra added layer. I will actually do one more question, so if you can stay on, that's great. If you can't, no worries. How are you interacting with folks who don't have as much virtual access, who don't have social media access or as much reliable internet access? Could you kind of speak to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that.
Go ahead.
So our school district is lucky enough to be able to hand out Chromebooks to all of our students. So with that, we're able to then communicate directly via their actual email address as students or through, like I said, our social media outlets.
I can say a little bit too. We've partnered with Cox Communications, who supports our programming, our school garden programming outside of this. But since this hit hard, they have a Connect to Compete program that is free setup cost, and then it's $9.99 a month for high-speed internet. And so we've been putting some of that documentation out there to the community. We're talking about putting flyers, hard copy flyers in the produce that we distribute, and they also are giving us 50 desktops for us to distribute to families that we work with that don't have tech. So they've been a great corporate sponsor.
And I just want to add that since we're dealing with schools have been very much, at least in our area, taking the lead on trying to figure out how to communicate to parents that can't cross the digital divide or not in Wi-Fi regions. And so we've been following the lead of the schools and using their point of contact, whether it's resource distribution or when the offices are open or food distribution, to use those channels that the school has already created to do some messaging that way.
And I agree. I think the best opportunity that we've seen to reach folks who don't have digital access has been through the emergency food distribution sites.
Great, thank you all so much. With that, we will close out this virtual gathering. A huge thank you to John Fisher for organizing and to all of our panelists for putting in the time ahead of the gathering, as well as for all of you that shared in the moment with all of our attendees. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, and thank you for sharing with everyone. If you have additional questions, definitely feel free to ask them via the survey that'll pop up at the end. We'll do our best to kind of match you with someone who could answer them, but also just head to our forum. This kind of reaches, all of the folks on the forum, and then everyone can see the answers to your questions. So you can get there via SGSO-Network.org/COVID. Hope you all have a safe and happy rest of your day. Thanks so much.